Well, first of all, Christine Fire Ice was the curator, so I've known her for 40 years, and she was right there in Berlin when I won the Gedenkbibliothek library competition in 1988. So together, I proposed that this exhibition be in two layers. It's a two level museum. So the ground level, the lower floor, is all very large black and white drawings of four seminal projects that launched my entire work. And the top floor is a number of watercolors and of projects that are ongoing. But what's so important about this exhibition is it really lays the foundation because she understood the work. And the first project was 1986, Porta Vittoria, where I made a polemic against the current rationalist idea that the city has to start from morphology and typology. I spoke about the phenomena of relation and about space. And I made these drawings where there was a whole section of the city where we made spaces and then projected them backwards into plans and sections. And that was a very important project that got me, that launched me in a way in Europe. And the second project was the America Gedenkbibliothek, a competition, very important because it was launched in the beginning for the Berlin airlift. The first library, the America Gedenkbibliothek, was paid for by the Americans. And this is when the Berlin Wall was up and all these problems were happening between Berlin and the Iron Curtain. The competition the building was paid for by Americans, and the competition was for German architects. And now they want to do an expansion of the building, and the Germans are going to pay for it, and they want young American architects, the leaders of their generation. So they took a long time, and they chose like 7 architects: Bernard Toomey, Tom Main, many, young people, all of my 1988 generation. And we won this competition, but then there was a political backfire in the Senate and it was stopped. But the project then, there's several huge drawings that when you walk into the ground floor of the building, which anchors this project in Berlin. That's another reason it's so exciting to open this. Then the next was the Palazzo del Cinema. The Palazzo del Cinema project, I was invited. And now, because I had won Berlin, they put me with James Sterling, Aldo Rossi, Rafael Mineo, all older masters of architecture, Jean Nouvel, everybody. And my project, Jean Nouvel said, "Steven, yours was the best." So suddenly, and it was in Domus, in 1991, Domus did a special issue on the Palazzo del Cinema competition in which every project was given 2 or 3 pages. So you can see that moment in architecture. And then I was invited to the competition in Helsinki, the Kiasma, 416 entries, and we won that competition. Up until that time, I was just a professor of architecture, working with one assistant teaching. But once we won the Kiasma competition, it launched my practice, and I always had like 5 or 6 people after that. And we built the building. It's been up for 26 years. It's in very good shape. But so the reason that I feel that I'm so excited about this small exhibition is it puts the foundation of where I came from in a firm frame, which shows that I was from the beginning a global citizen. None of the seminal projects that I did were in America. There's like Tom Main, my good friend, he talks about being from LA and how everything starts with the LA, the whole scene. But I was already from the beginning flying around. It wasn't my choice, but this exhibition kind of demonstrates what happened. How did I get started? And there it was. It was international competitions, and it was polemical ideas, and then from that time, yeah, I had a practice which was really a global citizen practice. You know, the first real building was Fukuoka, the housing the block in Fukuoka, which Izusaki invited me to build. So I, right from the beginning, as a young architect, I was flying between Fukuoka, Tokyo, Fukuoka, Japan, and Helsinki. You know, these are my two projects. So it's a very different beginning for an architect, a young architect. And it wasn't my choice. It just happened to be that way. So I was very excited that she could be the curator of this exhibition because upstairs, you know, you have the really current work like the Lewis Center for the Arts, the Maggie's Cancer Care Center. You have the Institute for Advanced Studies in Princeton. Now, these are not shown very thoroughly. They're just a few key watercolor concepts, you know, the thinking drawing that launches the project, a few for each of these projects upstairs. But what's interesting is in a small exhibition, there's so much dimension of thought that really launched my work, and I think in some ways it's more satisfying than a big exhibition with a lot of models and a lot of extraneous material because it cuts right to the point. No, I start every project, you know, with a small watercolor, you know, like 5 by 7, and I work on this every day. So and I have like something like 50,000 of these. Every building I ever did starts with a concept drawing on a 5 by 7. Now I started that because I could, you know, work in an airplane and lay it down on the tray, and you know, it's just it's a very convenient, and I can put a lot of information, and then the other thing was I could snap it with the iPhone and send it to anybody who's helping me work on the project. Immediately, we can make a connection about what would we do with this idea if we that drove the design, and immediately we go to computer drawings, of course, and use the machines and you know whatever you know printed 3D operation and everything. But the idea, which is the beginning, you know, from the mind to the hand, is in a sketch on a 5 by 7 watercolor. So those are the propelling thoughts, the get the project started. I always believe that there's an idea that drives the design, and if it's clear, you can put it on a 5 by 7 pad very simply. Yes, and like when we're doing a competition, we might cycle through 3 or 4 or 5 different ways to approach this, and you know that's a it's a process. And I also collaborate, well, you know, all the other people who are working with us together, and we criticize if this was the approach, or if that was the approach, or if this was the idea driving the design. So it's a economic way to precisely lay out a different strategy, 1, 2, 3, option 1 or 2, and I think it's a process that's been very uh, fortunate over the years because when the iPhone came in, yeah, it's not that long ago. It sort of supercharged this process. You know, the small drawing could be just snapped and sent to my colleagues, and it works very well. I teach in a very open-minded way. I ask the students to have an idea that drives their design, but I don't force them to do anything in imitation of what I do. I mean, they could make a model, you know, a little diagram model can also encapsulate an idea, right? They can make any kind of media that they want to use. But I discourage them in the first phase of a design process to use in any digital. I try to ask them to be more simple and precise, because in a certain sense, it's more open. There's a wider range of possibilities. As soon as you place it inside of a computer platform of a certain type, you're constrained by the dimensions of that kind of a program. So I teach differently than I personally work. I teach with my wife, Dimitra Zakrelia. She's a brilliant architect born in Patras, Greece. We're teaching a class, every Thursday right now at Columbia called Architecture Apropos Art, where the students take a figure like Carlo Scarpa. They analyze his architecture and his furniture, his ceramic works, his artworks, and then they try to make something inside of that language. So Carlo Burle Marx, who was also a painter and a landscape architect, they'll analyze his paintings and the landscape, and then they try to make something of their own inside of this language. So that this is a different kind of a class that Dimitra and I teach, but it's something I believe in, that there is this artistic driving dimension to great architecture. It's very open-ended. I mean, I think you can work with a sketchbook. You can, it's an unlimited open-ended thing. You can scratch something in the sand on the beach, But, it's a very open-ended. I mean, I also think I said this in my symposium. The opening in Berlin was really nice. There was lots of people. They said they never expected that crowd, and we were there, and there was a question and answer period. And I also admitted, when I say drawing as thought, I don't mean it's always a priori. Sometimes I'll sit down and I'll make a drawing, and I'll have the thought after I see the drawing. I get up, after a late night or whatever, and I make a watercolor in my book, in one of these little tablets. I just force myself to make a drawing. And then I think, this could be that. In other words, the thought and the drawing, they could collide not in an a priori way. So that's another possibility, that's another reason why as a creative effort, you force yourself to make drawings, because the drawings can speak back to you in a different way, even if they're not an a priori driving idea that's driving the drawing. So that was a kind of shock at the symposium. Some people laughed, and I said, but you have to be open to every possibility. I'm sure, by the way, Lebbeus Woods did that. I was very close to Lebbeus, and I was with him when he was doing drawings. And we would be talking, having a glass of wine, looking at whatever he was doing. And often he would draw something and then talk about what he thinks it is. It's important to use the watercolor process. You can see here shadows. You can see the direction of the light. So that's just a 5x7 study. But suddenly, the notion the light's being captured in these, half spheres, but there's the shadow, there's a direction of the sunlight. In a very strange way, that's why the watercolor, more than just a pencil drawing, you can throw a wash, on the thing, and you can start to understand, exactly where the light's coming from, where the shadows are coming from. This is a facade, a big, I think yeah, it's part of the process with a watercolor. It's very easy to throw the wash, in a few lines. And by the way, these are one of the reasons I went to this 5x7, because I wanted to be able to cycle through a number of ideas on any given moment towards any given project. And I can make one of these in a short amount of time. So I can, let's say in a 1 hour drawing session in the morning, I might be able to make two or three different iterations of a thought. And I can show the direction of the sunlight. I can indicate space and maybe even a materiality of a color. So all of that is very easily done with a very small. This is a traveling kit, so I don't need to carry very much in my bag. A charcoal pencil, a small brush, and I asked the stewardess on the plane, bring me a glass of water, and then I start to make a mess, and that they come by and they look at me, and give me a bad time on the airplane, because I got a watercolor going around, on the tray. Anyway, she'll come and say, "What are you, an artist?" I said, "No, I'm an architect." Oh, very interesting. Well, both in the large pencil, in the drawings in the exhibition, the ground level are all huge, large format, and they're all black and white. But some of them are watercolors. So I was exploring black and white as a watercolor, but at a big format at that time. It was also a time, 1990, where there was a deep appreciation of drawing in architecture that we don't have today. And so there was, people, there were exhibitions. I had an exhibition at the Museum of Modern Art in 1989. I was only, early 40s. So I was one of the youngest architects to have a large exhibition. I mean, it was one person. There was Emilio Ambaz in one gallery, and I was in a gallery. So 1989, and then these drawings were, that was in the models, lots of energy towards models. Here I'm in the archive. I have I could show you. This is all the models over the years that we have accumulated, and so this is all chronological. It's a whole archive of all the chronological models that. So there's the drawing, the original drawings, of course, but these models are very important in the process, and they're, to me, a model of a building doesn't lie, whereas the computer drawing, sometimes the perspective is warped, it's stretched some way, where proportions and space in a model, they don't lie. They're really close to in proportions in the design. So, drawing and models are, to me, very, very crucial in the process. No, in the show, Christine Fire Ice, upstairs, where there's several projects and a few drawings for each, she chose, furniture designs and carpet designs. There's several for the Maggie's Cancer Care Center and for the Reach, the Kennedy Center expansion. She chose watercolors of the carpets that I designed for the place, or pieces of furniture that were designed and built especially for the Kennedy Center, the Reach. So you can see that process is carried on all the way down to the detail of a light fixture, a chair, a carpet design, the detail in certain places in the building. So I can stay involved all the way through the process, and a whole set of working drawings could be going on, and that we're talking about what is the scale of this element, how does it intersect these, how did this steel intersect, what's this light fixture, how's this, and I make a quick sketch on the watercolor, send it, and then they make a scale drawing, and it's a process that goes on, all through all stages of the design. and realization. Of course. No, I have lots of drawings that are like complete exploratory drawings uh, about spaces, like real experimental architecture. I mean, in the spirit of Lebbeus Woods, I think, in a certain sense, you could almost say that all of his work was in that realm, right? In that kind of exploratory realm. So, I mean, with due respect to Lebbeus, I've made a number of drawings like that. And actually, I could pull together a whole exhibition where they're total explorations in abstract space. You know, I tend to indicate a human scale, even if it's a completely abstract composition of space. I'll try to draw in a human figure, so the sense of the human scale is given. Absolutely. My wife is doing a book about a number of our projects called The Architectonics of Music, where entire projects are launched based on a concept, a musical concept. And I think this is really I think today what's exciting about today, postmodernism that was displaced by deconstruction, and now the whole frame of what could be the beginning of a work of architecture can be anything. So the idea that some work of architecture being inspired by a piece of music or a piece of literature or sculpture or an artistic idea, I think that's the excitement of our architecture of our time. That it's a wide open possibility, and that kind of sense of the future possibility is something that we really cherish and have been able to realize in a few projects. And some of them are upstairs in that exhibition in Berlin.